everyone. My name is Richard Storey. I'm a freshwater ecologist currently working for an environmental consultancy based in Auckland, where I live with my wife and 2 children. I've known Nicola for many years through Arosha, the Christian conservation group, and Nicola invited me to give this talk to New Zealand Christians in Science a couple of weeks ago. So I'll just share my screen. One clear winter's night, when I was about 16, I was standing in my driveway in Auckland, looking up at a starry sky, and I suddenly had the feeling of not just looking up at space, but being in space. I felt like I was being held ever so lightly onto the surface of the earth as it hurtled through the vastness of space. A few years later, I was paddling a kayak on the Waikato River, somewhere near Port Waikato, and suddenly had an overwhelming sense of the mass of this water flowing beneath me, and that this great silent flow that I was witnessing for the briefest moment would just continue flowing and flowing and flowing unchanged for an unimaginably long time, whether I was there or even thought about it or not. I've stood under a starry sky many times since then and paddled on many rivers, and I've tried to recapture those sensations, that awareness. But although I've had some beautiful experiences, they lack that unexpected insight into that greater reality. It's almost as if in those moments I was truly awake, truly aware of the reality of space and time, and the rest of the time I'm half asleep or just plain dull. Those moments were gifts that were just given to me, and they could only be received, let go, and wondered at. But there's one place that always has a sense of transcendence to me, and that is Mount Ruapehu in the central North Island. I've been going there since I was a young boy, long before I called myself a Christian. From the turn onto State Highway 47 from National Park Township, when the vegetation changes from pasture to alpine scrub, and the mountain either stands dazzling white against an indigo sky or is blanketed in mist. At that point, I've always felt that I was entering a place that was somehow lifted up, physically higher, of course, but also somehow closer to heaven. The rocks, the beech trees, and the tussock, the silence, all seem to have a kind of reverence about them. The crystal clear waters tumbling down the rocky slopes have a very special purity. And the thin air, not just the visible world, but also the invisible, seems brighter, clearer, sharper. Knowing the power that can be unleashed from this ancient volcano only heightens the sense of awe. It is a majestic place, and I feel it again on leaving the mountain. Driving back through the pastures of the South Waikato, there is always a sense of just returning to the ordinary world. Why are these experiences special to me? Because now I know that each one of them has been a profound experience of God. Glimpsing the vastness of space and time in those moments of being awake has opened my mind to comprehend God's greatness, though surely in still a very limited way. And though I can't recreate those sensations, I think their effect on my mind has always remained. But vastness is still what we might call a natural property of the created world. In contrast, when I reflect on the mountain, the majestic mountain itself and the rocks, trees, rivers, and creatures there seem to be pointing to something beyond themselves, to something or someone even more majestic, pure, and, well, holy. I don't think holiness is a natural property of the created world. On that mountain, the natural is pointing to the supernatural, the immanent to the transcendent. I've discovered I'm not the only one to have revelations of God in nature. The Celtic Christians talk about thin places, by which they mean places where the veil between heaven and earth is thinner and God can be glimpsed. The thin places were typically wild places, like the islands of Iona or the Skellig Islands. And the thinness of these places was recognized not just by 1 or 2 people, but by many. And as people came there to pray and built monasteries and churches to create traditions of prayer, these places became thinner. The Bible is also full of stories of people who are having revelations in nature, revelations of God in nature, in particular places. In Psalm 19, the psalmist, looking up at the sky, says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." A theologian might say this is an example of general revelation, seeing the qualities of God as anyone can by looking with the eyes of faith at the natural world. Perhaps this is equivalent to my moments of looking into space and time with more clarity. But when the Bible tells stories of God's special revelation, when he meets personally with people and speaks in specific ways, place is also significant. Jacob in Bethel had a dream of a stairway between heaven and earth, and when he woke up, he said, "Surely God is in this place, and I was not aware of it." And he said, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." And then there are mountains. Throughout the Bible, mountains are particularly special places where God comes down to meet with people. One particular mountain, Mount Horeb, or Sinai, became known as the Mountain of God because God spoke to people several times there. It was the place where he first met Moses in the burning bush, and then later gave Moses the law. Centuries later, he met Elijah on the same mountain in a still small voice. Jesus, Peter, and John heard God's voice on the Mount of Transfiguration. And Jesus went frequently to the Mount of Olives to seek God in prayer. Gardens are also places where God meets people. The very first place that God created to have fellowship with people was a garden. The resurrected Jesus met with Peter, Mary, and John in a garden. And the final place where God will dwell with his people is a garden city. So even though the Bible portrays the whole earth as God's temple, it seems that God often chooses particular places to reveal himself. I wonder if you have been in places where God has revealed himself to you, perhaps in a fleeting glimpse, perhaps in a place you know well and visit often. It may be a wild place or a garden. For one friend I talked to recently, it's not a place at all, but a wild creature. There are some interesting biblical precedents for people encountering God through animals and plants too. If you have a story of experiencing God in a particular place or a creature, I would love to hear from you. I'm starting on a small project I'm loosely calling Thin Places. I'm not sure how it will develop, but I want to start by having conversations and gathering stories. I have a feeling that Aotearoa is a rather special place. And again, I'm not the only person to think that. I'm hoping that stories from here can then be shared and written down and maybe posted on the Arosha website. I have a few friends who wouldn't call themselves Christians who have also told me that being in nature is a spiritual experience for them too. And at some point, I'd like to invite them also to tell their stories. So why is it important for us to reflect on our encounters with God and nature and to share these stories? There are many reasons, including to grow our awareness of how we can discover more of God in natural places. But overall, I think it will help us to tell our bigger story of why creation is important and why we must do everything we can to protect it. Aotearoa is a special place for another reason too, and that is that spiritual values are actually protected under our Resource Management Act. The RMA not only protects the spiritual values for Maori, but for all of us. It's important that we learn to describe our spiritual values regarding the land. The last time I visited my mountain, we climbed a short way up from the ski higher place to get a better view, and we found ourselves surrounded by giant towers of snowmaking machines with engines roaring. The silence that is so much a part of the character of that place was completely shattered. I found myself deeply offended. Though no plants or animals had been harmed and no water polluted, something precious had been destroyed. A part of the natural world that so eloquently gives glory to God had been co-opted for human purposes. It may be that in future, ensuring that other special places are protected or remain protected comes down to the spiritual connections that people have with those places. I'd like to finish with one last special place. This photo is from the Mercer Bay Loop on the cliffs above Piha. It's just a little north of another coastal cliff top I have been going to since I was a boy. I recently shared this photo with a discussion group that I'm part of, and I talked about experiencing God in the vastness of the ocean, the height of the cliffs, and the power of the waves below. But there is something else here that is even more special, and that is the horizon. Looking at that horizon, you cannot help but imagine what might be beyond. And thinking about that just stirs in me a sense of yearning for the world yet to come. I'm reminded of C.S. Lewis's book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, where the little mouse Reepicheep paddles his boat over the horizon to the land of the emperor over the sea. God in his grace has created this world, not just with its own beauty and richness, but with the ability to point beyond itself to another world, which will one day be united with this one, and to its creator as well. I'm hoping we can start having conversations about the many ways that these things have been revealed to us. Thank you for listening.